The column was cracked down its middle, and the crack had been there longer than most civilizations had names. I noticed it the way you notice a fault line in bedrock, filed it, moved on. I was there for the soil. The shale waste does not welcome visitors. It does not warn them off either. It simply sits under a sky the color of a bruise and waits for the next thing to arrive and make a mistake. The plateau stretched flat in every direction. Black rock dusted with the pale mineral ash that gave the waste its name. The byproduct, the xenobiologist said, of a world slowly eating its own substrate, dying one layer at a time. I had a contract to assess whether the mineral ash had any commercial extraction value. 3 days of sampling. That was all. I had set up my core drill 40 meters from the column before I even gave it a proper look. The Ashkara. I had read the survey brief on the transit in. Ancient judgment engine, pre-compact era, sealed inside an obsidian housing that the waste had long since cracked without opening. 6,000 years of recorded approaches. Every major civilization that had passed through this region of space had sent someone. A warlord, a priest, a philosopher king, fleet admiral, to place a hand on that column and claim whatever it housed. The column had fed on every one of them. That was the word the brief used. Fed. The claimants arrived ambitious and left emptied, if they left at all. The Ashkara had a category for every kind of hunger, for power, for survival, for legacy, for revenge, and it consumed each one without distinction. The last party to attempt it had been a Sarathi delegation, 11 specialists 9 years ago. 3 came back. The other 8 were still listed as missing. I read that, finished my travel ration, and went to sleep. The crack in the column ran from 2 meters above the base to somewhere past the top, where the obsidian had sheared and tilted. The surface was not smooth. Up close, in the gray morning light of the waste sun, you could see that the entire housing was covered in a fine texture. Not carved, not machined, but grown, like the way minerals crystallize under slow pressure. I was chipping a sample from the base rock when my elbow touched the column's side. The sound it made was not a sound. It was the absence of the wind which had been blowing steadily across the plateau, and then was not. I looked up. The crack was glowing, not bright. A deep interior luminescence, blue-gray, like something behind frosted glass deciding whether to wake. Stood up slowly and took 1 step back. Then I stopped, because stepping back seemed like the wrong thing to do for no reason I could name. I was not afraid. I want to be precise about that. I was not performing calm, not suppressing fear. I was simply not afraid. The column had lit up. Interesting. 30 meters to the east, I heard Sarah Dawn call out to her colleague Male. They were the pair of Cathy researchers who had been camped on the waste's eastern edge for a week, studying the ash mineral dispersion. They were not supposed to be here to see this. I did not look at them. The glow deepened. I felt it before I understood what I was feeling. A pressure behind the sternum, not painful, more like the moment before you remember something important. The Ashkara was looking for something inside me. I knew that the way you know the direction of a sound without being told. It was searching, probing, turning me over the way I turned over a soil core to read its strata. It found nothing. I know that sounds like the wrong answer, but let me explain what I mean. It was not that I was empty. I had a job to do. I had a report due in 11 days. I had an opinion about the mineral ash's extraction viability, which was almost certainly negative, and I was mildly annoyed about that because the contract fee was good and a positive result would have meant a follow-on survey. Those things were in me, but they were not hunger. They were not ambition. They were not the reaching, consuming want that the Ashkara had apparently been feeding on for 6 millennia. I had no desire for the column, for what was inside it, what it might give me. I had not thought about it once between reading the brief and touching it accidentally with my elbow. The glow brightened. Pressure in my chest increased, not urgently, but with a quality I can only describe as confusion. It was searching harder. Behind me, I heard Male say something to Sarah and Kathy, short and sharp. I heard Sarah's equipment hit the ground. Neither of them moved toward me. The Ashkara went deeper. I felt it move through things I had not thought about in years. My daughter's face. A specific argument I had lost badly. The smell of a place I grew up in, a debt I was still paying off slowly. It was not reading memories so much as reading the emotional weight attached to them, testing each one for hunger. Finding none, My daughter's face carried love, not hunger. The argument carried mild retrospective embarrassment, not the desire for dominance. The smell of home carried something close to grief, but grief does not eat. I stood there and let it look. The glow in the crack had spread to the surface of the column. Thin lines of it traced the crystalline texture outward in every direction, moving the way water finds channels in rock. Following the path that was already there, illuminating structure that had always existed but never been lit. It was, objectively, of the more extraordinary things I had seen in 30 years of survey work. I made a note to log it. The pressure stopped. It did not fade gradually. It simply ended, the way a held breath ends when the body finally decides. The glow did not diminish. If anything, it steadied, became constant, resolved, like a machine that has completed its startup sequence and reached operational state. The wind came back. Then the column spoke. Not aloud, not exactly. It was closer to the way a very large structure settles under its own weight. Sound felt more in the bones than heard. But the meaning arrived with it, clear and without ambiguity, the way a tuning fork delivers a pitch. Fed nothing. Claimed everything. I stood there a moment. The meaning of it came in the space after. The Ashkara had been built to test claimants. Fed on whatever they wanted from it. Drew that hunger out and consumed it and them with it. The wanting was the access mechanism. The ambition was the key, and it destroyed each key as it turned. The system had worked for 6,000 years. Because every species that had ever reached this plateau had arrived wanting something. Or knowledge, or proof, or possession. The engine had never run out of fuel, because the galaxy had never run out of hunger, until a human being from a moderately obscure survey company had arrived wanting core samples. I picked up my chip sample from the base rock. I placed it in the collection cylinder and sealed it. The column glowed steadily, all its lines lit. Everything that had been dormant now resolved, and humming at a frequency I could feel in my back teeth. I heard Sarah's footsteps approaching slowly, crunch of ash under her boots. I heard her stop about 10 meters away. "Vale," she said quietly, "what just happened?" "I'm not entirely sure," said, which was true. The Sarathi delegation, the Orvith Compact Survey, the Don Kakel philosophers. She was listing them from memory, the way someone lists the dead. "No one has ever. The column has never." "I know," I said. I looked at the column for a long moment. The glow was the color of something very old deciding at last to rest. I thought about the brief. I thought about my report. I thought about the fact that I would have to file an addendum, and that the addendum would be longer than the primary report, and that the company's legal department was going to have a significant number of questions, and that I was going to spend a very large portion of the next 2 years explaining to various authorities and academic institutions, and probably several governments, why a 6,000-year-old judgment engine was currently humming quietly on a dying plateau, because a soil surveyor had leaned on it. None of that felt like power. It felt like paperwork. But underneath the paperwork, sitting still and quiet at the bottom of everything, something I didn't have a word for. Not pride, not awe, exactly. Something older than both. The Ashkara had searched 30 years of a human life, looking for the hunger that would let it feed, and found a man who had come to this dying world with a core drill and a contract, and nothing else. And that, apparently, was the only thing, in 6,000 years, that had been enough.